And now, without further ado, let me introduce our keynote speaker, Steve Downs. Steve is Chief Technology and Strategy Officer at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the nation's largest philanthropy dedicated solely to healthcare. Since 1972, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has supported research and programs targeting some of America's most pressing health issues, from substance abuse to improving access to quality health care. Steve is interested in innovative philanthropy, health IT, and how technology shapes culture and health. He leads and advises the development of programs to expand health information technologies that can improve the quality of American healthcare, including such initiatives as Project Health Design, the Health E-Technologies Initiative, and Connecting for Health. Steve previously served as Director of the Technology Opportunities Program, a U.S. Department of Commerce, National Telecommunications, and Information Administration initiative that promoted the widespread availability and use of digital network technologies in the public and nonprofit sectors. He was also a former research fellow at the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Born in New Hampshire, Steve has a master's degree from MIT and a bachelor's degree from Yale University. Now, following Steve's keynote address, he will be joined on stage by Rebecca Dorsch, the Glenn DeVries Dean of the Mellon College of Science, who will facilitate a moderated conversation and audience Q&A. So at this time, please join me in a warm welcome for Steve Downs. Steve?
Thank you very much, Dean Damon, and thank all of you for having me here. It's a real honor to be here. So I'm going to give a talk about the interplay of technology and life and health. It's also a talk that's fundamentally about the future. It's a talk about what kind of future we want to have. And I'm going to argue that there is both an opportunity and imperative to improve health, not just by focusing on medicine and health directly, but also by thinking about how we can reimagine and reshape the fundamentals of everyday life. Now that's big, right? That is a huge challenge, but it's one that I'm going to argue we have to take on now, and we have to take on with some urgency. So I'm going to start with a macro view of health in the US, and Dean Damon was sort of alluding to some of this. Some of you may have seen this chart before. It's from Max Roser at Our World in Data. And just to explain it really quickly, you've got life expectancy on the vertical, per capita health expenditure on the horizontal. This is the top 20 or so most industrialized countries. The lines represent the march of these data points through time. Okay. And so you can see the US is way out there. We are lowest life expectancy, but we are #1 in spending. And then this is a little out of date. This is 2014. So Eric Topol kindly updated it to show that life expectancy has actually trended down very slightly the last 3 years, but spending continues unabated. You know, there are lots of ways to measure the performance of a health system, and you could argue, well, life expectancy, that's a very crude measure. You know, maybe this doesn't really tell the whole story. So let's look at some others. So this is Bloomberg does an annual index of the healthiest nations in the world, and I don't know if you can see, the print's a little small, but we rank 35th. And if you sort of look at the numbers in terms of their kind of index scale, you can see the healthiest nations are kind of in the low 90s. We're at 73. Or we can take a look at another metric. This is a bit of a wonky one, but this is basically how healthy is the average 65-year-old in your society, okay? And so a ranking of nations based on that. And let's see, we are not in the top 10 or 20 or 30. You probably know where this is going. Nope, not in the top 50, but there we are 53 right behind Algeria and in front of Iran. So, look, this is not good, right? It's really bad, and I think, I mean, I think the point here is that we don't have a small problem in the country. This is a problem of a really big scale. It's a really big magnitude, and I also want to emphasize this is not just a numbers thing or a cost thing. You know, these are people's lives. And you can argue, well, yeah, but health and healthcare are really worth it. You know, you spend a lot of money because it's health. But I promise you that no one who is having tens of thousands of dollars a year spent on their healthcare is having a great time, right? These are people's lives. So, you know, you're all smart, and you probably know that all of these statistics are really the result of the complex interactions of many different factors. There's a lot of complexity underneath this. But at another level, it's also pretty simple. And it's simple in the following way. It's hard to be healthy in the United States, right? It's hard to be healthy in the United States. It's hard work. And a lot of that has to do with our lifestyles. And our lifestyles, in turn, are shaped by a number of different factors. The most important factors are really socioeconomic factors. It's things like housing conditions and neighborhood conditions and poverty. They're also shaped by culture and by norms. So I want to give you a little bit more data on this. This is a slide from Vox. This is the rise of obesity in the US. And I want to point out sort of really two things to notice here. One is obviously the shape of the curve, right? You know, that is not a good trend. But the second is sort of the time scale, right? This is about 1960 to 2014 or so. So this is actually a pretty modern problem. You know, this has happened over a couple of generations. This did not used to be a big deal. And actually, this is, again, this is 2014 data. There's actually an update to this from 2018, and it's not good. 40%, 40% of American adults are now obese, and that's just obese. There's another 32% or so that's overweight. And you know, my former colleague Jim Marks, who was a wise man, once said that the human genome doesn't change this fast, right? What's changed are the circumstances in which we live. What's changed is the environment around us. And if you think about it, you know, we've acquired some pretty weird habits. We eat in our cars. We binge watch Netflix. We spend hours a day trapped in these strange steel and glass cages. And for white-collar workers, we often arrive at places like this and then sit for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. And it turns out that these are not ideal behaviors for the human body. And in effect, it's almost as if we try to be, or actually, what's happened is that we've been changing our environment at a rate that is much faster than our species can evolve. And so what's happened is we've actually gotten to the point where we're not ideally suited for the world we've built. And there's a great book I'd recommend by Dan Lieberman. He's an evolutionary biologist at Harvard, and he makes this exact point. And he goes on to say that so many of the chronic conditions that used to be really rare, but that we now see in great prevalence, conditions like heart disease and type 2 diabetes and depression and obesity and chronic pain, these are conditions that actually result from this maladaptation, right? From this mismatch between the species we've evolved to be, what we're optimized for, and the world that we've created. And it's almost as if when we try to be healthy, we're swimming upstream. We're swimming upstream every day against currents that seemingly are getting stronger and stronger. And our response to this is to tell people to swim harder and maybe teach them better swimming techniques so they'll be more efficient swimmers, or give them performance-enhancing drugs so they'll be even stronger swimmers, or to add insult to injury, give them Fitbits and Apple Watches so they know exactly how much more swimming they have to do every day to stay afloat. I could keep going with this metaphor, but I'm just... Now, the thing about swimming upstream is that some people are able to do it. You know, and I think there are a lot of folks that, you know, if you've got the time and the resources, maybe the flexibility and autonomy around how you control your day, you can find ways to stay healthy. Some people overcome it. But what happens is when you tilt the playing field like this, sorry, another metaphor, some people succeed and some people don't. So this guy's doing all right. I think the only thing missing from this scenario, the guy with the driver and the Peloton in the back of the van, is somebody to make him smoothies for when he's finishing his workout, right? But actually, you know, this was in February. That may be in place by now. The point is, this is not available to everybody, right? This is an extreme example, but you know, again, some of us are able to overcome this upstream challenge, but many are not. So we go back to our river. And we can keep on with our strategy. Right? We can keep on encouraging people to try harder. But it's not working. And I think we have to think different. We have to be much bolder and much more radical in our thinking. And I think the question that we should actually be asking is, what would it take to reverse the direction of the river? What would it take so that it wouldn't be such a struggle all the time to be healthy? Now, part of the problem is that I think that we treat health like an app. Now, I don't mean literally like an app, although literally there is an app called Health. What I mean is that with the app approach is we leave intact all the fundamentals of everyday life. How we eat, how we sleep, how we move from place to place, how we entertain ourselves. We leave these intact, and then we add a thin layer of wellness on top and expect that to add up to health. But you know, health is not an app, and I think the way that we're going to reverse the direction of the river is if we start by truly valuing health, truly valuing that, and then expressing that value by embedding it throughout all of our designs. Right? We need to take this value and embed it into our society's operating system, to build it into the OS. And I think that part of the way we do that is we challenge these kind of patterns of our everyday lives. We stop taking them as givens. We stop pretending it's always been this way. This is the way people have always acted, and we're always going to. Right? We've got to start by asking, where are these coming from? So let's talk about that. There's this great quote from Winston Churchill, one of many, who says, "We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us." And you could replace buildings by technologies, and it would still be true, maybe even literally so. But technology does this by defining what's possible or impossible, by defining what's easy and what's hard, by defining what's socially, culturally normal or considered abnormal. You can draw a line from Henry Ford to suburbs that look like this, to the fact that about 85% of us get back and forth to work each day like this, largely alone in our cars. Or from this sort of miraculous little invention, right? This box with moving images that come from the sky, to the average of 5 hours a day that Americans spend watching television. Or from this incredible historic announcement by Steve Jobs in 2007, to the behavior we all recognize as the eye slouch. It's just about 10 years that happened, right? So what does it mean to build health into the OS? It means imagining how we could use technology to re-engineer and reshape these daily routines, right? How we eat, how we sleep, how we move around, etc. And redesign them with health as an explicit goal. And there are a couple of different ways of going at this. One is what I would call a direct way, which is where we identify some target behaviors and say, what can we do with technology to try to sort of facilitate those or pull people toward those behaviors. And I'm going to get back to that. The second is, an indirect way, where you take products and services that are actually not about health, and then you ask, how might you design them differently if health were actually a goal? And I'll give you a really quick example. You just saw it. This is Google Maps. And this is a time that I asked Google Maps to give me directions to a building. I had just gotten out of a train in Penn Station in Manhattan, and I asked for a building about 10 blocks away. And so Google Maps naturally gives me driving directions. I'm in Manhattan. coming out of a train station, going to a building that's 10 blocks away. It's not raining. It's a very, very simple change, right? You actually say, why isn't the default walking if the distance is, let's say, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 minutes? Maybe that's a slider for you. You set a personal preference. Maybe it gets really clever and knows when it's raining, so it doesn't recommend it if it's raining. But the point is, and I'm not trying to throw shade at Google. I think Google is actually doing a lot of serious things around health. The point is defaults matter. Defaults matter for behavior, but they also matter for cultural norming. You put walking as the default, and you start telling people this is what people do. This is what we as a society do. So I think it's an illustration of this kind of health positive approach. Again, where you take a product that's not about health and you say, how could it be better if health were a goal? So second way of approaching this is kind of the more direct way. And what I'm going to do to talk about that is give you what I would call a starter set of 5 behaviors to think about. And I want to give a little disclaimer, which is to say, first, these behaviors are all evidence-based in the sense that we know they're good for you. I won't pretend that they are the absolute definitive list of the 5 most impactful behaviors we could address, but I think they're a good start. So let's talk about those. So the first is cooking real food, and I do mean cooking, and I do mean real food. This is not about microwaving the frozen burrito. But I think we know that this cooking meals is actually becoming a lost art in America. It happens less and less. Fast food sales are up. There was a stat I saw the other day that I think was that on any given day, 36% of Americans are eating at least one meal in a fast food restaurant. I shouldn't say eating at a restaurant. They are purchasing their fast food from the restaurant. But the trend is also true with prepared foods. Prepared food sales are way up as well. And if you think about it, this is not surprising. Think about what it takes to actually cook a meal at home. Right? You have to think about what you want to make. You have to find a recipe. You have to get the ingredients. You have to prep them. You have to cook them. You have to clean up. It's a lot of work. But I think there are a lot of opportunities actually for technology to take that long process and make it faster, more convenient, more joyful. Lots of things that can be done. Second is moving around, just getting physical activity. And I want to be clear here that I'm not talking about exercise. I'm not talking about workouts. Not about figuring out how to get more people into gym memberships. Dan Lieberman, the biologist that I mentioned, has a rant about this. He says, never in all of human history have we voluntarily wasted physical energy. Right? Never, none of our ancestors ran around in circles to burn off the valuable food that they spent the day gathering. Right? And he said this is a fundamentally unnatural behavior. We're fighting evolution when we tell people to exercise. And again, obviously people do. Some people do. They're very dedicated to it. But every time you're fighting against nature, you ought to pay attention to that. What I'm talking about is actually engineering movement back into everyday life. I think we've systematically engineered it out the last couple of generations. But there's so many opportunities these days, I think, with smart cities and what's going on with transportation and mobility, to actually use technology to make active modes of transportation and alternatives much more palatable, much easier. Third one is sleep, something that I'm reflecting on a lot this morning. But as Americans, we are now starting to become chronically sleep deprived. Just give you one stat on this. In 1960, 2% of Americans got an average of less than 6 hours of sleep every night. That number is now over 30%. And there's a lot of research that talks about sort of the fundamental importance to your health of sleep. Again, I think there's some opportunities here with technology. There's things you can do around controlling environmental conditions in a house, let's say, to make it conducive to going to sleep. There's also this issue, and this is a bit of a thorny one, but there's a quote from Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, who once said, "We have 3 big competitors at Netflix. Our 3 biggest competitors are HBO, Hulu, and sleep." I mean, they literally have in their SEC filings the idea that they think they can cut into more of our time. They can take away time you spend having a drink with your spouse, take away time you go out with friends. They're going for it. All right. So there's some challenges here. fourth is building social connection. And again, I'm not talking about Facebook likes or Snapchat streaks. I'm talking about deep, meaningful connections with family, with friends, with neighbors. There's increasing research on both the protective elements of social connection, but also the health harms that come from social isolation. So this is another area where I think we have opportunity. And then the last one is spending time outdoors. This is another thing that we don't do a lot of these days. The latest data I saw from I think it's the American Time Use Survey, said we spend 87% of our time indoors, 7% outdoors, and 6% in our cars. And it turns out there's actually a lot of benefit from being outdoors. There's one of the most amazing things you can do for your health is actually spend 3 days hiking in a national park. But besides that, just being in a local park or just even being outdoors, not even moving around, just being outdoors, getting some daylight, turns out to be very good for you. And again, speaking of evolution, there's an interesting book on this called The Nature Fix by Florence Williams. And one of the things she talks about in that is that in all of human history, we have spent 99.9% of our time outdoors. So and I'm not advocating that we go back to living under trees, but again, we are evolved for certain things. So how are we going to facilitate these kinds of things with technology? I'm going to give a few examples, and sort of a caveat here is, I would say these examples are sort of directionally correct. There's some issues with each of them, I think, in some ways, but they give you a flavor for what I'm talking about. So the first is prepared meal kits. You know, whether it's HelloFresh, Blue Apron, other companies like that. Definitely issues with some of these services. But again, I think a really interesting step in the right direction in terms of taking that idea of cooking a meal at home for your family, your spouse, and making it a lot easier, a lot more convenient. Second is electric bikes. I'm actually really excited about electric bikes. And the reason is, I think from a behavioral standpoint, you're lowering the barrier to a really healthy activity, right? So if you live in a hilly area, and I think Pittsburgh has a couple of hills, or if you let's say your distance from your workplace is just a little longer than you feel like you can do every day on a manual bike, an e-bike is going to kind of take that edge off and make that more of an opportunity for people. And I think there's actually some early research that suggests that rather than displacing, or rather than manual cyclists now pedaling less, you're actually seeing this is displacing car rides as opposed to healthy bike rides. Third one is, I don't know if folks know a utility called Flux, but it's a program you can add to your laptop. What it does is it removes the blue light from your screen sort of on a schedule every night. Blue light actually suppresses melatonin, which is something that can help you a natural hormone that helps you go to sleep. So what I like about this is that it's not like an app that like pops up a message at 11 o'clock and says, dude, go to bed. It's something that actually subtly changes the environment to make it more conducive to go to sleep. And I think that's an important aspect of this. Another one, and this is actually not a product you can buy, but it was an interesting experiment conducted by Sidewalk Labs called Park Time. So anyone who has little kids who lives near a park sort of knows that kind of challenge of how do I convince to get my kid to bundle up, go to the park when I know that like we may get there and there's going to be nobody there. And so what this was is actually the idea that you would join a neighborhood list, and so that when any one of you showed up at the park, you'd all get a ping that says, hey, somebody's now at the park, and that's kind of an incentive to pull you out there. And what I love about that, it's social, connects you with people, it gets you outdoors, gets you moving around. And then the last one, and some of you may have predicted this would be on the list, is Pokemon Go. So what I love about Pokemon Go is it's a game. It has nothing to do with health, right? It is a game. People play it because it's fun, because it's entertaining. But what it does, again, is it's entertainment that takes you outdoors, you're moving around, and you're often doing it with friends. So terrific example, I think, of technology that is not about health, but it's shaping everyday life in the direction of health. So I'm going to wrap up by saying something that, particularly at a place like Carnegie Mellon, is pretty obvious, which is that we live in a time of technological marvel. Right? It's an extraordinary time. We carry supercomputers around in our pockets. We make phone calls on our wristwatches. We have virtual reality. We have augmented reality. There is the Internet of Things. We're seeing extraordinary breakthroughs in machine learning and artificial intelligence, many coming from this campus. And we're also at the edge of, I think, a revolution in materials engineering and digital fabrication of materials. So we don't yet know how these and other technologies are going to combine to form the new normal of our everyday lives. But we know that they will. And how they will is going to be shaped by values, either explicitly or implicitly. So I think we need to be really explicit about this. I think we want to have that conversation and ask ourselves, what kind of future should our technologies shape for us? I think we should embrace health as a core value. We should take a health positive approach to our technology. We should make it an explicit design goal. We should build it deep into our society's OS. And if we do that, I think we can reverse the direction of the river. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for that. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm going to change my Google Maps to walk. So hello, I'm Rebecca Dorge. I'm the Glenn DeVries Dean of the Mellon College of Science. I'm pleased to join Steve for a discussion that we'd like to be more on the informal side and interactive with the audience. If you guys are not engaging, I do have a whole list of questions that I can ask. So we'll just get started.
Sure.
So I will ask the first question, and then maybe we can pick up from there, okay? All right. So you mentioned that health should be embedded not only in technology, but also many sectors of the economy and how we think about things. So urban planning, transportation, real estate, food industries are obviously industries that come to my mind. What are some of the less obvious industries, and how can health be embedded into those? And I just want to say that your graph of obesity versus income, the epidemiologists tracked fast food as a spreading disease, and they used a well-known fast food restaurant, has a big M, and it tracked right with that trend. So what are the industries that we're not thinking of? I mean, what I just said is completely obvious, but what are the industries that are transformative with this new mindset that people aren't thinking about yet?
Yeah, so let me take a step back and also first acknowledge that technology is one area of opportunity. You know, I mean, I certainly don't want to suggest that the solution to all of our health problems is technology. I just think that there's a really great opportunity in that. So, you know, I don't know if this is less obvious, but I think one of the areas that we're particularly interested in as a foundation, and we think is really important, is sort of early childhood. And so it is things like, you know, maternity and paternity leave policies, and having sort of consistency and equity in areas like that. It is access to quality childcare. It is actually access to early childhood education. So I think that's a key area. You know, I think perhaps less obvious, because I think we have in some ways such a fixed mindset about it, is entertainment. You know, and I was talking a little bit about Pokemon Go and everything, and I think we have so long been kind of had this mental model that entertainment is seeing something on a screen while you sit. That, I mean, honestly, I have a hard time seeing past that and thinking, well, what's the alternative? But I think that's something that when I reflect on sort of the last 100 years or so, is so much of what technology has done has been able to actually take household labor and convert it to leisure time or work time, depending on your preference. And then technology's kind of filled that leisure time with television largely, and obviously we're seeing variations on it with different screens that still let you watch television. But I think that's an area that's ripe for innovation. It's not an easy thing to change, from a societal perspective, but I think that's somewhere we could go.
Great. I want to point out that we have a microphone on this aisle if anyone would like to join the conversation and suggest an industry that has great potential in your mind. If you could just introduce yourself and then ask your question, that would be great.
Hi, I'm Jan Polanski. I'm actually a graduate both in terms of the chemistry department at Carnegie Mellon,
Hello.
computer systems, and the business school. I'm now involved in holistic healthcare, and one of the areas that you aren't mentioning that I think is really interesting, we're looking at epigenetics and what's going on. If you look at the blue zone, Healthy at 100, they're looking at the cultural values. And over in Europe, they actually look at the consequences in terms of toxicity. We're not addressing, in terms of the values of industry, to incorporate green chemistry and other things that we could do to reduce the exposure to endocrine disruptors and carcinogenic chemicals. Could you address that, please?
You can clap, it's okay.
I was just saying,
Thank you.
I think that's a fantastic comment, and I think a really important piece of this. And I'm not sure that I can address it other than to say that I agree with you. I think that's really important. I think one of the things that I find fascinating is it gets back to this very simple notion that we've changed a lot about the world in the last 60, 100 years, and that has had all sorts of effect on human health that I think we're just learning. Right?
My suggestion would be to incorporate in terms of both the education process for the sciences as well as in business, the consequences of the choices we're making, because we've looked at increasing profitability, but not looking at the consequences for our health and society.
Right.
Great.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. For those of you who are unaware of what the epigenome is, you're born with your epigenome. It's dynamic, and exposure to a variety of things like radiation change your epigenome, which ultimately controls whether certain genes are expressed or not. So these decisions that we're making in industry are actually affecting things that we have no control over, nor are we really aware of the exposure. So it all needs to be thought of together. So it's a very, very well-made point. Thank you. Hello. Would you like to
Hi, I'm
introduce?
Cassie Ruan. I graduated from this business school when it was in another building a long time ago.
It wasn't that long ago. It was in
No,
a
it
different
wasn't,
building.
but I graduated a long time ago.
Okay.
Now, I'm concerned about the whole role of our workspace and of the recent mission stated by the Business Roundtable, that we aren't just, the corporations aren't just there for the shareholders. T. Boone Pickens just died, thank God, and they're here for what used to be before the Reagan Revolution and supply-side economics. The stakeholders of the corporation include the employees, the community, and the shareholders, of course, and suppliers, etc. What is the role of that Reagan Revolution and the supply-side Chicago School economics had to do with our lifestyle? I mean, work is important.
I mean, I think that's a great question, and one of the things that I think that we suffer from, and perhaps this is a challenge to the school here, is that I think we have expressions of intent from some place like the Business Roundtable, which are, again, sort of in the right direction, right? They're saying there's more to our role, than shareholder profit maximization. What I think we have less of is the ability to maximize on other things, or to even sort of audit or hold accountable for some of those other things. I think there's a lot of complexity. Even to just take a company's sort of portfolio of products and say, what's the net health impact of this company on the world, is not a trivial question. I think it's actually a really interesting research topic and challenge.
It is quantitatable. I mean, you can, right? Can you imagine ranking every in every industry based upon some factor that?
Oh, I think it would. I think it would be
eye-opening.
really exciting. Well, I think from a couple of levels. One is sort of the you could rank and rate and sort of kind of give incentives and positive and negative around that. The other thing for me, it's always been fascinating, and I'm not an economist, at all, but is sort of the idea of capturing externalities, because every company produces externalities that we don't have mechanisms to capture and build into the price, and so you should get to the mic and explain that.
Come on around. If we can take another question from the audience, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Rebecca. I'm a student here at Tepper. I agree that, it's really important for children to be raised in a certain way, in a healthy way, starting from a young age. But these days we see that technology is affecting that. My little nieces and nephews, all they want to do is take Netflix, take my phone whenever they see me. How do we deal with that?
So some of it is, I think, in the conversation we're just having about being able to understand the impacts of these things, and I think the science on that is I think we're in an area where there's not a lot of hard science yet, but every parent knows exactly what you're talking about. There's a lot more attention that's being paid to that right now, but again, I think this challenge for companies that particularly have built their business models on attention. It is very hard for them to back off of that. I know there is this whole techlash, and all of these companies are starting to think, geez, we need to do better here. So Apple has screen time, Google has a digital wellness initiative, Facebook says they want to be time well spent. The challenge is, can they actually do that in a way where they maintain their profitability, because
margin,
they do not get forgiven for being unprofitable.
Right.
But I think a lot of it is about people saying they're not going to stand for it, or they're really upset by it. I think that those voices have to be heard.
Just say no.
We know how well
It's
that
hard.
works.
I know, it's hard. It's hard. Putting your cell phone down and really being present in the moment seems like a pretty revolutionary idea these days. I mean, I say to the undergraduates, the first-year students, the best thing you can do in your education is put your cell phone down and be present in the moment. This is 4 years of your life that you're never going to get back, but you will always be staring at your cell phone. So I think that conversations like that from everyone, bring it to the forefront, have the conversation, and change society going forward. We actually have more control than most people think we do.
Yes, I agree, and I also there's an interesting debate, and if you want to get into this, there's a fascinating podcast with Ezra Klein at Vox, and he has on a guy named Nir Eyal, who I can't remember the title of his first book. It was Hooked or something like that. Basically, there's a guy who wrote a book which was basically how designers can create products and experiences that will hook their users. And then he wrote a book aimed at users to say how not to be hooked by these. No comment on that, but so he and Ezra were sort of debating this idea of kind of personal responsibility of sort of turning the technology off and sort of surviving the onslaught of exquisitely engineered experiences designed to keep you coming back. In some ways, I think a lot of my talk is kind of a metaphor for this, which is, say, if you design a world which makes it hard to be healthy, it's really tough to then start blaming people for not overcoming it. And I think there is a very important role for personal responsibility, but when most of your users are behaving in a way that you say is not the intention, then I think that the designer has some liability. It's like when Steve Jobs was still alive, and I can't remember, it was the iPhone 3 or something, had a problem with the antenna, and people were complaining about that, and he said, oh, well, it's because people are holding the phone wrong. And he was quite justifiably criticized for that sort of attitude. If you build something and everybody holds the phone wrong, you built it wrong, right? So anyway, sorry for the rant on that.
We like rants. Hi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Julia. I'm a student in the School of Design.
And
Good. Just who we need right now.
I really enjoyed your metaphor about swimming upstream. And you mentioned that some people are able to swim upstream. And yes, it's good to think about reversing the stream, but we can also possibly look at how do people swim upstream even despite factors like socioeconomic factors, kind of like a positive deviance approach. Do you have any examples of or thoughts on that?
I don't know that I have examples on that. I mean, I'm a fan of positive deviance. I think as a design technique and as a learning technique, I think that's really important. I think there's stuff that can be learned from that. I also think there are limits when the stream is too strong, and I guess that's sort of where I come down on it. I mean, I think I should be clear. We're not going to reverse the direction of the river in 5 or 10 years. This has taken a long time to build up. I think it would take a long time to reverse. So there's a lot that needs to be done in the meantime to help people, sort of overcome it and deal with the reality that we have. And I think positive deviance is a good way of approaching that. At the same time, I think we have to take a long-term perspective and try to reverse it.
I like this term positive deviance. It sort of fits my whole lifestyle. So we need to stop there. But Steve will be around during the break that's about to follow after I say a few words. So Steve, thank you very much. And I knew I didn't need all 6 questions. For those of you who couldn't see, there was a line of about 3 or 4 more people deep that had questions. And please do talk about this during the break, because this is why we're here. We're here to have these conversations and to meet each other and exchange ideas. So what Steve talked about today will definitely revolutionize how we approach health in America. Every day our life is affected by technology that we're not even aware of. Me standing here in this podium with this behind me. And as we discussed, these improvements aren't going to be made by one person or one discipline. I've been at Carnegie Mellon. This is the beginning of my 4th year. Here at Carnegie Mellon, we're addressing problems in healthcare at the intersection of policy, business, computer science, and ethics. You'll hear more about artificial intelligence as it's being used in healthcare during the panel that directly follows the break. We all know that this interdisciplinary approach to the real-world problems is something that is very Carnegie Mellon, and we pride ourselves on that approach. At the Mellon College of Science, the college that I lead, we are relying on this interdisciplinary approach to revolutionize the future of science. We are bringing together the Mellon College of Science expertise in foundational sciences with the university's expertise in computing, engineering, and data science. And we're doing this to transform not only the way scientists think, but the way they train scientists of the next generation and the way the actual science is being done. We are doing this by harnessing the power of automation, artificial intelligence, computation, and most importantly, human ingenuity. One person doing this now that you will hear from later today is Barb Shin Cunningham. She is the director of the Carnegie Mellon Neuroscience Institute. Barb is one of our many researchers who embrace our philosophy by bridging engineering, computer science, and neuroscience to develop a new assistive hearing device to solve what we call the cocktail problem. So the cocktail problem, you're at a cocktail party, someone's talking to you, you can't hear the person in front of you, you can see the mouth moving, but you can hear all the noise in the background. Today's hearing aids, as we call them, they're amplification devices. They amplify noise. They amplify the noise in front of you at the magnitude that that person's speaking to you. You can't hear that person because the noise in the background is also being amplified, and the whole problem just gets much bigger. So Barb will join Steve today on a panel that is entitled Science and Science Fiction. Please plan to attend. Barb is pretty lively, so you're going to have a good time, Steve. Guaranteed. I also hope that you will attend the $3.28 trillion question, which I'm intrigued what the 3.68, I got it wrong, that features an MCS alumni, Rumi Naik, who is among the distinguished panels. Rumi received his bachelor's degree from the Mellon College of Science. We'll leave the years out of this. Is that okay? Degree from the Mellon College of Science, and then he went on to get a PhD from the School of Computer Science. And Rumi is a long-time proponent of our philosophy. In fact, his thesis work had to do with automating science, automated science. So you are well ahead of your time. And we're proud to call you one of our own. Rumi is now using automation to accelerate vaccine development as a AVP at Saint-F Pasteur. Please enjoy the rest of the sessions. And I just want to say, be in the moment here. Put your cell phones down, be in the moment, because I believe strongly that we are living a moment in history that will be remembered as transformational. Automation, AI, computing, together with human ingenuity, will both disrupt and revolutionize not only healthcare, but the majority of today's most pressing problems in the world. Thank you for a great first session. I think we definitely set the stage, Steve, so thank you. We have a short break, and I've been asked to request that everybody be back on time at 10 o'clock. Thank you very much.